Well, here we are back with another review. Can you believe it? This time of the KTC G42P5, a 42-inch 4K 138Hz WOLED monitor. And there's a lot of interest in this one because it typically goes on sale over on Amazon for far lower than something like the LG C4, at least back when that released, making this a good alternative on paper for those of you looking for a 42-inch dedicated gaming monitor with all the goodies that come with OLED, such as the infinite contrast ratio and the super fast pixel response times, meaning it could be really good for HDR and gaming. But the question is it actually, or have they horribly mangled the firmware? Let's go ahead and find out. But real quick before we do, I do want to mention that KTC did send me this monitor for review, but no talking points were dictated to me and no scores were either. I would never accept such a thing, and it will not be impacting my review. But with that out of the way, let's dive into the review. And a couple other things I want to mention is that it does have an alleged 0.1 millisecond response time. It will have standard G-Sync and FreeSync support, and it will, of course, support HDR as well. But moving on to the design, I kind of like it. I like how it's all metal. It does definitely feel very premium and very heavy, and that could be a good or a bad thing for you, but some people might not like how chunky it is from the side. It is one chunky boy. Another thing to keep in mind is that you do have to actually purchase the stand separately, and it does tilt up and down as well as clockwise and counterclockwise, but it doesn't go up or down or tilt left or right, so it is a little bit limited on what you can adjust. Also, you can mount it on VESA mounts, but you're gonna need one that can hold something pretty heavy. Now, in terms of the ports, pause if you need to, but I do want to bring up that the two HDMI 2.1 ports I found were only operating at 24 gigabits per second, meaning half of the speed that you would expect out of a full bandwidth HDMI 2.1 port, meaning that even to get 4K 120Hz working on this display over HDMI, you're gonna have to use display stream compression, which is really unfortunate, meaning that to get the entire 138Hz actually properly working, well, I had to use both DisplayPort as well as display stream compression, and had they just used a regular 2.1 port, this wouldn't be an issue. So very disappointing to see that, and guys, come on, get a full bandwidth port in there next time. Anyway, coming in at a price of roughly, the lowest I saw was just under $800, and well, if you add on the $90 roughly stand, it will cost you anywhere between $800 to $890 typically. But now let's talk about the actual performance of the panel. Let's start off with the color, and like many other WOLED panels, it does look very good in SDR, but in HDR, it does fall short of QD-OLED by some margin, and even Mini LED as well, since in my opinion, likely the white subpixel can potentially wash things out as they get very bright. Now, in terms of the actual accuracy, we gotta talk about this because out of the box, it doesn't look too bad. It's tracking EOTF in SDR. Yes, the RGB balance is off and it is stretching colors a little bit further than it should be. However, I couldn't really get it to look right in the sRGB mode. It unfortunately did raise the shadows just too much, making it look a little bit washed out. And the only mode that I found that looked right in SDR was actually the Adobe RGB mode, which is fine, but most content is made with sRGB in mind, meaning that you might have some minor color stretching going on, but where it gets crazy is the HDR mode. Now, I don't know what's going on here. I tried unplugging and replugging the display, resetting it multiple times, but this is very bizarre behavior. And as you can see here, it is massively over brightening shadows and it's over brightening highlights. I don't know if it's something that can be fixed. Hopefully it can, and they can go ahead and put that on their website. But if you're gonna buy this display, just be aware, this is, in my opinion, best used as an SDR Adobe RGB calibrated display, and it's best to leave it at that. Now, in terms of the color volume, it came in, pretty decent in HDR, but unfortunately short of the 100% DCI-P3 I'd like to see for an HDR monitor. Now, this isn't any different than any other WOLED display for the most part. However, just do be aware, yes, QD OLED will give you better color. Does it make up for it in the brightness? I would say not really. I mean, overall, it looks fine. It's not super dim, but in comparison to other TVs, it kind of does look dim, and it even falls short of the 42-inch LG C4, where that display is actually significantly outpacing it in a 10% window and a little bit in a 100% window as well, although it is a little bit brighter on average than most of the 32-inch OLEDs that I've reviewed thus far. And it's a very similar story when it comes to an actual game with a high brightness scene. Now, in terms of the actual gaming on this thing, how does it feel? Is it messed up? No, it's not. It does feel very, very good. The latency overall is coming in at 26 milliseconds for everything in the PC, which is pretty decent. It puts it right in the middle of the pack, and in fact, quite a bit faster than I was even expecting. So good results there. And even in the motion test, as you can see, it's an OLED and it's just fantastic. The motion performance will make this a great display for online gaming in SDR. Now, in terms of the text clarity in sub-pixel layout, well, this is WRGB, so it is going to have a bit of issues with text fringing, but overall I did feel like it looked pretty clear and pretty good on text. However, the overall image did unfortunately suffer because yes, this comes with a matte coating. Yuck! Now, I don't know why LG and other manufacturers continue to want to put a matte coating on monitors. It just doesn't make any sense to me. There are so many reasons not to, including the oily look you can give to an image or the sparkling you can kind of see, as well as it does actually slightly blur the image as well and reduce the vibrancy, making it overall a pretty negative impact on the image. Now, to be fair, this particular coating on this monitor when you're at a reasonable distance isn't horrible, but it is still a problem, and we're doing all of this to try and avoid reflections. But if you're in a bright room, you're going to get the entire screen to be washed out because the matte coating will diffuse the light over the entire screen. So I really don't even see it as a positive in any way, and only a negative. I really want to see manufacturers stop putting matte coatings on displays by default. I think it's a huge mistake. However, I will give them props, and maybe this is just panel lottery, but the viewing angles were pretty good. I didn't really get too much of a green tint like I've seen on some of the LG C series TVs, so that was pretty good. Although again, your mileage may vary. They are technically using very similar panels, so it certainly could happen. And then finally, let's talk about the sound. Overall, I found it to be pretty good. I'm not going to get too deep into this. You definitely could use the sound on this display. However, of course, a good pair of headphones or a good stereo setup is going to give you a little bit more clarity, a little bit more bass, a little bit, more natural timbre, but it's certainly better than a lot of other things that I've heard. Nothing really to cry about. And overall, I felt like the menu in firmware it did have a few issues for me, and it was a little unintuitive to kind of go through, but overall, yeah, it got the job done. And in terms of VRR Flicker, does it have it? Yes, it's an OLED. It's going to have a bit of VRR flicker in really dark scenes, but it wasn't out of the norm for any other OLED. So overall, would I recommend this monitor? And that's a tough question because, as you just heard, this does have quite a few issues, and most of them come from the firmware. And that's really a shame because this could be a lot better than it is, but I got to tell you how it is. Sure, it's maybe between like $100, $150 cheaper than a 42-inch LG C4 right now at face value, but you do kind of got to include that roughly $100 stand with it, which puts it roughly within about $50 of an LG C4. And the 42-inch LG C4, while it does lack DisplayPort, well, you do get full HDMI 2.1 bandwidth on that thing. You get a glossy coating, which looks really, really nice and looks basically midnight black, even in a brighter room, which is really awesome. And it gives you better clarity, of course, because of that. And you just get way, way better tuning and firmware out of the LG C4, and it's brighter. It's just about everything about the display is better on the LG C4. And again, it may only cost you roughly $60 more than to buy this display if you're including the stand. And for that reason, it's really tough for me to go ahead and recommend this over an LG C4 at the current point in time, unless there's something specific about this that you're looking for that you want to get. If that's the case, yeah, I'll have affiliate links to this in the description below. I mean, it's OLED. It's going to give you a great experience in SDR. but it just has a lot of issues, and I think the price is too close to the LG C4, which is significantly better for me to recommend it over that. So overall, I'm going to give it, this is a tough one because it's, yeah, OLED is really good, but I'm so disappointed by the firmware. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. It's fine, but again, the C4 is great, and it's barely any more. Whether you're looking to connect a new console, gaming PC, or just need a fast and reliable HDMI cable to connect over long distances, Rupro has you covered with their certified 8K HDMI 2.1 fiber optic cable available in sizes of up to 50 feet and can deliver a perfect full 48 gigabits per second connection over distances other cables could only dream of reaching. And with 48 gigabits per second of bandwidth, it can easily drive 8K 60 FPS or 4K 144 FPS 10-bit HDR video through its ultra-thin, flexible, and durable housing, and it even supports ER. So if you're in the market for a cable that can drive a beautiful new TV or monitor, be sure to check out Rupro on Amazon today.